Hey everybody, welcome to the video. It's Sunday, August 22nd. We're breaking down this now 8-game day slate that we have over on DraftKings. It was a 10-gamer, but we did lose a couple games in the Northeast due to the hurricane coming in. But fortunate enough for us, we do know this information before recording. And if you do find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. If you want to take that one step further, become an official member over on Patreon. Link is down below in the description for that. And last but not least, this video is sponsored by PrizePicks. I'm sure most of you know what it is by now, but if you don't, it's daily fantasy sports simplified, just you versus the projections. There's no sharks, 150 max contests, salary cap restrictions, or anything like that. Just you versus the props that they offer each and every single day. And as of right now, if you're a new signee over on PrizePicks, you can use code CPENN and get a free money bonus, instant deposit match up to $100 when you tell them I sent you. I think that'll be it for the plugs for the most part, so without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And as always, we'll start with the pitchers, then move on to the stacks. And I gotta be honest, pitching isn't amazing today, but we do have some solid options and some decent matchups, so I'm not gonna complain too much. Although after yesterday's slate where we had like so many good aces to talk about, it's a little bit of a disappointment, but we still have some decent options here. So we'll start up top with Framber Valdez, $9,800. It feels a little expensive for him, but he draws a fantastic matchup as a lefty versus Seattle. They really struggle versus left-handed pitching this season, striking out a ton, close to 28% this season. And if we're looking at Valdez's splits, he's got good numbers in the season. ERA, xFIP, SIERA all below 4. K rate's only around 22%. I wish it was higher for a guy that's close to $10,000. Plus the walk rate's really high at around 11%, so I'm not loving that, like over 4 walks per 9. But he limits the power. He gets a ton of ground balls, which is always nice. Less than a 70 ISO given up, a near 70% ground ball rate with only a 15% fly ball rate. The hard contact rate's low, the homers are low, and the good matchup versus Seattle to boot. I think this is probably a good spot for Valdez here. If you want to play him, I have no problem with that whatsoever. I think he's fine in cash games today. They're striking out 27% of the time versus lefties, only a 295 WOBA and a 90 WRC+. So I know Valdez isn't the most exciting pitcher out there, but I think he'll be safe enough to where you want to roster him in cash games today. Only a 3.8 implied team total against him. Pretty heavy favorite and a 6K prop over in Vegas. Then dropping down to probably my favorite pitcher on the slate here, it's Adam Wainwright at $9,300. He just draws a really soft matchup versus the Pittsburgh Pirates. And 2 games ago when he started versus them, I think he had like 40 fantasy points in the game with a full-on 9, only gave up 2 hits. It was an exceptional game from Wainwright. And while we can't expect that each and every single time, it's still a good matchup, and I think he's probably going to be a safe bet for like 18, 20 plus fantasy points in this game, assuming he can pick up the win, which I think he should, because I do think that Cardinal stack does look pretty good today, but only a 3.4 implied team total against him. Very heavy favorite, 6.5K prop over in Vegas, and while he's not the biggest strikeout guy, kind of similar to Valdez, he doesn't give up a ton of power, has a lean to the ground balls. ERA, xFIP, and SIERA all look pretty solid, although I will say the SIERA is above 4, but I'm not going to complain too much here. He doesn't really walk too many guys. He has half the walk rate pretty much that Valdez has. And if we're looking at the Pirates splits versus right-handed pitching this season, they don't really strike out too much, but only a 130 team ISO, 85 WRC plus, and a WOBA below 300, plus they lost Adam Frazier. So, besides Brian Hayes, you're not really scared of too much in this lineup. So $9,300, I think he's a solid option, even though the K rate isn't super high. And then dropping down to some SP2 options, we have Steven Matz at $8,200. He draws a really soft matchup versus Detroit. And while Steven Matz isn't like an elite level pitcher, I think he'll be good enough in this game to where he can get you 15 plus fantasy points, and at $8,200, that's not too bad whatsoever. And Detroit's a team where they're not really a pushover team anymore because they do have some pop versus lefties, but they will strike out quite a bit versus left-handed pitching. Looking at their numbers this season, I believe it's right around 26.5% to lefties. The WRC plus is close to 100. The WOBA is above 300. OBP above 310. ISO at only 145 though, but I do like the strikeout upside. I know Matz isn't a big strikeout guy, only 23% on the season, but he's in a good spot. He's a very heavy favorite here. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't pick up the win. I think the Blue Jays absolutely smashed the Detroit Tigers today. Especially want to boost his floor as well. But $8,200, it's not exciting, but he is an option. Then Carlos Hernandez, if you need to go real cheap today, if you want to like full-on stack the Blue Jays or another expensive team, you might have to dig down to the super cheap range. I can't really recommend it in cash games, but in tournaments to make things work up top, I don't think Hernandez is a terrible play here. He's had his fair share of decent games this season. The guy's not the best pitcher out there. He can throw some heat, and this matchup versus the Cubs is really, really good. Like a guy like Chris Bubich, who's not that great of a pitcher, had a no-hitter going for quite some time yesterday versus the Cubs, and while I'm not expecting a no-hitter or anything, I think Hernandez could probably get by a handful of strikeouts, maybe a run or two given up, go like 5-6 innings and maybe pick up the win, which would not be a bad day whatsoever below $6,000. Plus, it looks like the wind's going to be blowing in at Wrigley today, which is a massive boost for pitching, so you're facing a terrible lineup. You have good pitching environment, and I think at $5,900 he makes sense. Like, I know he's not the best pitcher out there, but 15 points at $5,900. That would be just fine with me. He's not giving up a ton of power, has a lean to the ground balls. The hard contact rate's kind of high at 36%, but only a homer per 9. 24% K rate, and the Cubs, they are brutal versus right-handed pitching right now, so I think Carlos Hernandez is playable at $5,900, probably more so in tournaments. With that being said, I think it'll be it for the pitching, so we'll move right over to the stacks. His return versus the Cleveland Indians in his last start, but man, it was absolutely terrible, and we can't even look at his numbers because it's such a small sample size, it doesn't even make sense to look at them, but the Blue Jays should be able to smash here. I mean, Marcus Semien, Bo Bichette, Vlad, Teoscar Hernandez, Corey Dickerson. Those are like the elite plays there. Well, I guess I should say 1 through 4 is the elite plays, but I like that price tag in Corey Dickerson a lot for the lefty and righty matchup. But pretty much everybody is in play here. If you can't afford the expensive guys, the bottom half of the order, I think is just fine as a cheap stack if you go really expensive at pitching and you want to use another expensive stack today. But the 1 through 4 here and even the 1 through 5 are going to be some of the best plays in the entire slate. If I had to pick my favorite guy, I'd probably say Semien because you can play him at second base and shortstop, but obviously, Vlad's got all the upside in the world. Teoscar, Bo Bichette. I mean, I love the Blue Jays today. Team total north of 6, and I would be very surprised if they're not the highest scoring team on today's slate. Moving on to the Atlanta Braves. Once again, I feel like I've talked about them each and every single day, but any single time a team is in Baltimore, I mean, all the pitchers for Baltimore are pretty bad outside of John Means, and I realize John Means is pitching today, but he's no stranger to giving up power to right-handed bats, and this is, I mean, one of the best places to hit all of baseball. Looks like there could be some rain in the forecast, but nothing like the Northeast. I think maybe just a shower or two, but the game should play. I'll have to kind of circle around back to that around lock and see how the weather is looking, but a lot of these guys do hit left-handed pitching pretty well, and like I was saying, John Means is not a terrible pitcher, but if we look at his splits versus righties, he is giving up a 231 ISO. The strikeout rate's fine. The xFIP and ERA are not terrible, but over 2 homers per 9, and your 50% fly ball rate, 30% hard contact rate. So I'm kind of just targeting some righties for homers here. But even then, if they can get Means out of the game early on, the bullpen for the Orioles isn't that great either, and you could use pretty much anybody here. But I mean, Ozzie has been murdering left-handed pitching this season. He's been actually one of the best bats in the league versus them. He's got a 286 ISO, 325 batting average, over a 400 WOBA. Jorge Soler's got a 281 ISO versus them this year. Freddie Freeman's got close to a 200 ISO, and he's a lefty. I mean, I wouldn't really skip him in full-on tournaments, although you're paying a lot of money for him, $6,000. I'd probably rather get the Vlad there, but Austin Riley's got a 160 ISO, Dansby Swanson a 211 ISO, Adam Duvall over a 200 ISO, even Heredia, who, I mean, he's dirt cheap at $2,700. It's not a huge sample size, but batting 282 with close to a 200 ISO versus lefties this season. Jack Peterson's probably a skip for me, but William Contreras, cheaper catcher, over a 200 ISO. Like, a lot of these guys profile very, very well versus left-handed pitching, and while I don't think John Means sucks or anything, he is a guy that will struggle with power versus righties, and this really isn't a park that works too well in your favor if you struggle with right-handed power. And then the last team I want to talk about here is the St. Louis Cardinals at home versus a pretty average lefty at best in Steven Brolt. But, I mean, a lot of these guys do hit lefties very, very well. I know I say the same thing each and every single time, but, I mean, it's just a correct statement. I mean, Tommy Edman leading off with a 250 ISO, 280 batting average. Paul Goldschmidt's always been good versus lefties. Arenado is murdering lefties this year with a 350 ISO and a 313 batting average. Tyler O'Neill batting cleanup, a 327 ISO. Molina, 245. Bader, 162. The batting average is pretty terrible, but there is some cheap pop there, although it does strike out quite a bit. It doesn't really walk much whatsoever. Paul DeJong, a 219 ISO. Then Sosa, I mean, he's dirt cheap at the very bottom of the order, but I mean, there's really nothing exciting there, but he's a dirt cheap option if you want him. But, I mean, the numbers aren't super encouraging. But the Cardinals, if you need a cheaper stack today, I think they're in a pretty good spot. They have a team total north of 5 and do like these price points quite a bit. They do, I think they like kind of mix well with an expensive stack today, like the Toronto Blue Jays or the Atlanta Braves. And actually, I lied. There is one more team I want to talk about, but I'm not really planning on full stacking these guys. But I think maybe doing like a mini stack of the lefties makes sense here versus Touki Toussaint. They're playing in the same exact amazing hitting park that Atlanta is playing in today at home in Camden Yards. Touki Toussaint is a guy that has struggled with power so far versus lefties, giving up over a 200 ISO and over 2 homers per 9 with some hard contact. So I think guys like Cedric Mullins, Anthony Santander, DJ Stewart makes for some interesting cheap plays today because they're really not that expensive outside of Mullins. I know he's close to $5,000 even though he's been killing it this year, but Santander, he's cheap with some power at only $3,000. DJ Stewart doesn't really do anything well besides hit for some pop versus righties, and he's only $2,400. So if you're looking for some cheap bats to mix in as one-offs or a cheap mini stack here, I don't think that's a bad way to go if you're trying to get some expensive pitching and an expensive stack like the Braves or the Blue Jays today. But with that being said, I think that'll be it for the video. So I hope it was helpful, and if it was, make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. I'll be live on this channel right here at around 12 p.m. Eastern, breaking down the NASCAR DFS slate. If you guys want to check it out and come hang out, play the slate, ask some questions, I'll be more than happy to have you. We have football coming soon. Can be more excited about that. As you can see, I got my Cleveland Browns shirt on today. But I think that'll be pretty much it. Don't forget to check out Prize Picks if you haven't already. You can get a free money bonus up to $100 when you use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. And if you want to support the channel over on Patreon, link is down below in the description for that if you do want access to some extra content. But I think with that being said, I will stop rambling, and I wish you guys the best of luck today. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I'll see you on Monday for the next video.